All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to look at a totally different way of thinking about personality. Forget the labels, forget the boxes. What if your personality isn't a thing, but a place? A dynamic, explorable map of your own mind.
I mean, really think about that for a second. Instead of saying, I'm an introvert or I'm an optimist, what if you could say, my mind is a landscape with these deep valleys and these well-traveled highways? Well, today we're going to explore how you might actually start to draw that map.
So, if we're going to draw a map, we need data, right? Where do we get the raw material for something like this? Well, the source material for this idea has a pretty brilliant and kind of weird starting point. All that seemingly random noise inside our own heads. I mean, our brains are data generating machines. Every single night, they run these wild simulations we call dreams. And during the day, it's a constant stream of daydreams, worries, little thought loops that go round and round. It all feels like static, right? Just noise. But what if it's not? What if there's a hidden structure, a secret geometry, just waiting for us to find? To really see how this works, we need to look at some of that raw data. The source material gives us two really powerful, totally opposite dreams from a case study. Think of these as our first two satellite images of this uncharted territory. And wow, when you put these side by side, the contrast is it's night and day. On the left, Dream 1 is basically a modern workplace anxiety nightmare. You're isolated, you feel like everyone's watching and judging you, and you can't even get out. There's a muddy flood blocking the exit. It's a feeling of pure devaluation, but on the right, Dream 2 is the total opposite. It's this feeling of returning to your roots, being seen, and feeling this incredible sense of belonging and love. It's a powerful state of reconnection. Okay, so we have these two completely different signals. One feels like a wound, the other feels like the remedy. But how do we actually decode them? How do we turn these stories into actual points on a map? Well, this is where the core concept from the source material comes in, and it's a real game changer. The key idea is something called an identity mode, or, and I love this term, an attractor basin. Just picture your mental landscape has these deep valleys or bowls. Those are your basins. They're these recurring psychological states, that familiar feeling of anxiety or that specific kind of confidence or nostalgia that your mind just has a tendency to fall into. They're the well-worn grooves your thoughts love to travel. So let's connect the dots. That first dream, the one about feeling isolated and watched at work with nothing to do, that's not just some random nightmare. It maps perfectly to a very specific identity mode, what the source calls Basin 1, the exposed idle expert. It's that recurring state of feeling totally competent but completely sidelined and devalued. And what about that second dream? The one about returning to the university and feeling that deep sense of connection? Well, that points to a completely different and much more positive state, Basin 6, the meaning anchor. This is that powerful, stabilizing place we fall into when we reconnect with who we really are, where we came from, and what gives us purpose. Okay, so we're starting to identify these individual states, these basins. But now it's time to zoom out and see the whole picture. How do all these different places fit together to form a complete map of someone's personality? This is where it gets really cool. The source proposes that this entire landscape can be mapped out in a 3D space, and that space is defined by three super fundamental psychological needs. First, you've got agency, how much you feel like you're in the driver's seat of your own life. Second, there's belonging, that feeling of connection to other people. And finally, coherence, how much the world and your place in it actually makes sense to you. And this is where you start to see just how rich our inner worlds are. For this one person in the case study, the analysis found at least 10 distinct basins. We've already met a couple, but look at the others. You've got blocked exit, that awful feeling of being trapped, or performance trial, that state where you feel like you're constantly being graded, or even macro system analyst, that detached mode where you zoom out and just analyze big patterns. And this is how it becomes a real map with actual coordinates. Look at Basin 1. That exposed idle state. It's way down there, low on agency, not so great on belonging, and pretty low on coherence. It's a miserable psychological neighborhood to be in. Now compare that to Basin 6, the meaning anchor. It's high on almost everything. This isn't just poetry anymore. We're using geometry to define our psychological states. But here's where it gets really, truly interesting, because this map isn't static. We don't just hang out in one basin forever, we move between them. So now let's look at the pathways, the mental highways that we travel down every single day. These pathways basically tell the story of our inner lives. Take a look at Highway 1.
You go from feeling exposed and idle, and where does that lead? Straight to feeling like your exit is blocked. That's a classic downward spiral, right? Or look at Highway 3. Being constantly evaluated can easily make you feel like your tools and skills are failing you. But, and this is so important, there are also highways to better places. Sometimes being in a crisis, being trapped in Basin 2, is the very thing that pushes you to find your meaning anchor in Basin 6. These are the narrative arcs of our minds. So, why does any of this matter? What's the big takeaway from looking at our personality as a kind of geometry? What does it actually mean for how we understand ourselves? I think this quote from the source material just says it all. Personality is the stable shape describing how your system moves. Just let that sink in. Personality isn't some fixed thing that you are. It's a dynamic pattern. It's the shape of your dance, not the single spot you're standing on. So you aren't just one thing. You're a whole collection of these recurring states, your basins, and the well-worn paths, your highways, that connect them all together. Some of us might have really deep, hard-to-climb out of basins of anxiety. Others might have super highways that lead directly to creativity. This whole system, this unique, personal geometry, that's what makes you you. And that leaves us with a final, really fascinating question to think about for yourself. What are your recurring identity modes? What are those valleys your mind just seems to fall into over and over again? And more importantly, what are the highways you travel between them, day after day? Because thinking about that, well, that might just be the first step to redrawing your own inner map.